You ever had that one person in your life who seems like they've got everything figured out? Like they're so perfect, it's annoying? That's how I felt about Mr. Jacobson. He was the kind of guy everyone in our apartment building respected. A retired firefighter with a hero's reputation. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that made him look wise, not old. He always had time to help you with your groceries or fix a leaky faucet, and he knew everyone's name. Solid guy, people would say. And yeah, I thought so too, until I didn't. It started a few months ago when I moved into this dingy apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a cheap place to call home while I worked my first real job. Mr. Jacobson lived across the hall from me in 4B. I remember meeting him on my first day. He'd smiled at me, a big, genuine grin, and said, "Welcome, kid. If you need anything, just knock." His handshake was firm, his voice calm, and he had this way of making you feel at ease. And at first, everything was fine. He was polite, neighborly, always around to lend a hand. He even helped me patch a hole in my drywall once. But then, I started noticing little things that didn't quite add up. It began with the hallway light. Every night, it flickered. Not like the annoying buzz you'd expect in an old building. It was rhythmic, deliberate, on-off, on-off, like a Morse code message I couldn't understand. At first I thought it was a wiring issue, but when I mentioned it to Mr. Jacobson, his face went blank. "Probably just the building settling," he said, then quickly changed the subject. The next weird thing was the smell. It wasn't constant, but every so often, when I'd pass by his door, I'd catch a whiff of something foul, like damp earth and mildew, with this sharp metallic tang that made my stomach turn. I asked him about it once, jokingly. "Burned dinner," he said, waving it off. "I'm no chef." But it wasn't burnt food. I knew that much. Things really started to get strange when I heard the knocking. It always happened late at night, just as I was drifting off to sleep. Soft, steady taps, like someone was gently knocking on my door. The first few times, I thought it was a dream. But one night, I stayed up, determined to catch whoever was messing with me. At 2:37 a.m., it started. Tap, tap, tap. I tiptoed to the door, peering through the peephole. The hallway was empty, except for Mr. Jacobson's door, which was slightly ajar. A sliver of light spilled out, cutting through the darkness. I knew I should just go back to bed, but something about that door pulled me in. I opened my door as quietly as I could and stepped into the hall. The closer I got, the louder the sound became, this faint, wet squelching, like someone stirring a pot of thick soup. "Mr. Jacobson?" I whispered. No response. I pushed his door open a little wider, and that's when I saw it. His living room was wrong. The furniture was all pushed to the sides, and in the middle of the floor was a large wooden crate, like something you'd see in an old shipping yard. It was half open, and inside, I could see what looked like dirt. But it wasn't just dirt. There were things buried in it. Old photographs, torn scraps of fabric, and what looked like small animal bones. I backed away, my mind racing. What the hell was this? Just as I turned to leave, I heard his voice. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. He was standing in the doorway to his bedroom, his shadow stretching across the room. For the first time, his usually warm, inviting face looked cold, almost predatory. I'm sorry," I stammered. "Your door was open, and go home," he said, his voice low and firm. Now. I didn't argue. I bolted back to my apartment, slamming the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I locked it, and I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor with my back against the door, too scared to sleep. The next day, I convinced myself I'd overreacted. Maybe it was just some weird hobby. Maybe the late-night knocking wasn't connected. I mean, the guy was a retired firefighter, a local hero. He couldn't possibly be dangerous, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. I noticed how he never had visitors, how he never brought groceries up the stairs, and how his curtains were always drawn, no matter the time of day. And the smell, that damp, metallic stench, got worse. One night, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I was going to confront him, ask him directly what was going on. I waited until the knocking started again. It was louder this time, more urgent. I grabbed a flashlight and opened my door, stepping into the hallway. The knocking wasn't coming from my door. It was coming from his. I took a deep breath and knocked. The sound stopped immediately. After a few seconds, the door creaked open, just a crack. "Mr. Jacobson," I said, "are you okay?" No answer. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell hit me like a brick wall, and I gagged, covering my nose. The crate was still there, but now it was closed, and the floor around it was damp with something dark and sticky. I was about to turn and leave when I saw it. A hand, pale and motionless, sticking out from under the couch. Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me. I whipped around to see Mr. Jacobson standing there, his face twisted into a grimace. "I told you to stay out," he said. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "What's in the crate? What are you hiding?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped toward me, and for the first time, I noticed the knife in his hand. "You shouldn't have come in," he said angrily. "Now you can't leave." I don't remember much after that. Just flashes, him lunging at me, the sound of the knife clattering to the floor, and me running for my life. The police found him the next day, sitting calmly in his apartment like nothing had happened. They opened the crate and found, well, let's just say I wasn't the first person to get too curious. They said he'd been using the crate for years, hiding things no one should ever hide, things he'd taken from people who trusted him. And now, every time I hear a knock at the door, I wonder, what if it's him?